Hi, and welcome to Filmmaker's Compass Podcast. I'm Dustin, joined of course by Christian.
I'm CP.
How's it going today?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
I'm very excited for our guests.
I
We
am
have
too.
a lot of good discussion topics and movies we want to talk about, so should be fantastic. I'll throw it over to you. Go ahead and do a little introduction, and let's welcome him to the show.
This is my good friend, writer and director, Harrison Reishman.
Thank you, Christian. Pleasure
Thank
to be
you
here.
so much
Thank
for
you
coming
for
on the
being
show.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Let's get right into it. Obviously, you grew up in West Virginia.
I did.
That is not like an area that most people think of when they think about developing filmmakers.
Not traditionally. No, not traditionally. No, shooting their horror films there, potentially.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've driven through West Virginia once.
Beautiful, right?
Oh, it's like the most green I've ever seen in my life.
50 Shades of Green.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What is it like as a filmmaker being there?
Well, as a filmmaker...
Were you like the one and only in like your part of the state, or like as a kid, can you shoot stuff even? Or
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the movie Super 8, which was actually shot in West Virginia in the Northern Panhandle. Growing up, I didn't know that I wanted to be a filmmaker yet.
Okay.
Because growing up in a rural area, it didn't even seem like that was a possibility. Like, we watched the screen, we didn't know that there was something behind the screen.
yeah,
You
I
know,
can get
that
that.
there was a whole process. Sure. So my first real contact with filmmaking was at Blockbuster. Going to the local, going to the local rental,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Going to those rental companies and seeing the boxes, seeing the movies, and then, reading the back on the stories. And so
Yeah.
it was really about the stories and the experiences and being transported from places that you're not in, which I think any person in a rural area can relate to.
Okay.
Even in a post-Blockbuster era. There's Netflix. It's all about the experience of where your imagination can take you.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was about kind of discovering that you can tell these stories. Not until college did I discover filmmaking itself. But I feel like West Virginia, my upbringing, certainly aids itself to what I bring to my films.
And what was your town?
It was Hurricane, West Virginia. And that's
Shout out to Hurricane.
Yeah, shout out to Hurricane. They deserve it. They're a great community. Little town, super supportive. West Virginia had local arts as like a big part of its community.
Really?
So that was something that I was always big into. While I wasn't into filmmaking, folk art is huge. So I really got into a lot of wood carving art, and working with wood and marble, and doing a lot of installation art.
Yeah.
That's what I did as a child.
Okay. So you always have had a background as an artist. You've
Always
just
had a background as an
changed your
artist.
medium.
Changed the medium. Was telling stories. Again, was in installation art. As a child, was something that had a life of its own that I would always try to explain to people, but they would just see the image that I created.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, I didn't know that I could then foster some of these skills into a whole career. And it didn't happen in West Virginia, only because I didn't go to college there. Well, we did have an education system I seemed to benefit from. I definitely got strengths from my teachers and good people in the community. Ultimately, we didn't have anything that was like, this is the AutoCAD class, or this is the filmmaking class. There was nothing that could even nudge you in a direction of all these technical skills or the world that existed in these kind of artistic paths. So
that's understandable.
So yeah, it was, and it's still the case. So that's why I always try to support the arts there. Going back to the West Virginia Film Festival this year.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah, so always trying to re-engage the community and keep the arts alive, keep filmmaking, current in the state.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, that actually, that rings true for me personally, because in high school, my good friend Sean and I were part of a first film class, and I'm from Granger, Indiana, but South Bend, where Notre Dame is. And we actually, at our high school, we were part of the first film festival. They hosted it at Notre Dame. We got to do this big movie premiere. Everybody's movie was shown on the big screen, but it was really cool as a kid to go through that experience. It's like wonder getting to see your own movie on the big screen. Yeah, just supporting the arts, it's such a big deal. It makes a difference.
It does. It really does.
Then you went to the other Virginia.
I went to the other
for
Virginia.
college.
Yeah, the rival Virginia. I defected Virginias. Yeah, went there for college.
I will forever now refer to it as that. Like when I'm doing the 50 states, I'm like the other Virginia.
The other Virginia.
You still were not thinking of film when you went to the University of Virginia.
I was not. No. Freshman year, I started off on a chemical engineering track.
Okay, that's about the farthest thing from filmmaking I can think of.
Yeah, and quickly discovered that was not the field for me. When my English class was telling a story about a pipette, that you would use in a chemistry lab.
Yeah,
that was it. Tell the story about this pipette. Oh, lovely. So yeah, I did a little hopping around. Eventually settled in psychology, and then the business school there you couldn't apply to until your junior year. We call it our third and fourth year at UVA, because that's how we do it there. First, second, third, fourth. And
gotta be different.
Gotta be different, just a little different. And so ended up transitioning from chemical engineering in the engineering school to ultimately business and double majoring in psychology.
I think that's fascinating. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but as a filmmaker, does having a background in psychology give you a leg up or a different insight when you're writing or working with actors, or have you never thought about it? Overthinking it right now.
No, you're not overthinking it at all. We all are in the business of working with crazy people. So I feel like I'm quite apt for the field. But in terms of how it shaped me as a filmmaker and as an artist, there's something certainly about character-driven stories and understanding the psychology of a person, of people. That's why when I did my first short film, or got commissioned for my first short film, it was Dostoevsky that inspired me. What's the psychology behind these
psychology of people? Dostoevsky.
Precisely. So it's about trying to understand the flaws and the beauty in humans and humanity, at least for me. Yeah. And then the business aspect is not only just like me putting my producer cap on, but trying to figure out the arena to tell these stories, to tell each individual story, so that it can find a market. I don't want anybody's time to be wasted in a project, and I don't want the end result to be missed. The end result doesn't have to be, on the level of Endgame or something. But it's just about finding an audience and having the art matter.
Well, I think that's really smart, because I feel like, and Dustin and I have this conversation all the time, so many artists, read Filmmaker, come at this from the perspective of, this is my vision. I want to make my vision. I want to make, this is my artistic vision. And they seem to forget the whole other side of the business, which is, you're taking money from people. You need to find a way to make that money back. Who actually is going to care about your art? Is there a market for it? And so it seems like from your perspective, if you can kind of fall back onto that business mindset as you're going through the creative process, it seems like every project you make, it seems like, is going to have a better chance of coming to completion if you're thinking of it throughout the pre-production and production process.
Absolutely. I mean, everything needs to have a target. One of the things that kind of surprised me in recent times, especially in the short film world, a lot of people commit to short films that never make it through the post-production process. Never make it to a finished product.
Believe it.
And even films, that happens. A lot of art projects, whenever you're collaborating with other people, this can always happen. I've learned that early, also knowing that that's very common out here. I've always tried to make sure that everything can live on some platform. Art is the eternal, and if you don't complete it, then nobody ever knew what you were aiming for.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. I had a teacher in school who said the road to hell is paved in unfinished movies. And I think that is very true. If you're a filmmaker, that is. You obviously are not coming at this industry from a film school background.
Correct.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that prepares you better for success? Do you think that's a disadvantage? You can totally slam film school if you want. Like, we don't.
No, I think everybody's different. But I think for me, I don't need a structured environment for myself to find work or to try to figure things out, So I didn't feel like I needed classes in filmmaking for me to learn filmmaking. I didn't realize until really in college, everybody has to work a job, and so, find this job that you're most passionate about. Okay. And they say, find the job that you like and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that's bullshit, because I've found what I love and it still is work. And it still is responsibility, but it is what I truly love and care about. And so kind of using that, my inspiration and my drive is what has fueled me. And I think that especially where we are now and in the 21st century, the opportunities for anybody to be an independent filmmaker and then rise to more traditional or studio positions is available to them because the economies of scales have come down so far that people can edit a film on their laptop if they need to. People can shoot a movie on their iPhone. Microphone technology, which is a huge part of filmmaking. I mean, sound, camera. We're willing to forego a lot of things, but in terms of what do you need to make a movie, it's never been more in-house for an individual than ever. And so that's really what's lended itself to me as an opportunity. Bought a camera, invested in a computer, and in terms of what we need to make a movie, it's a story, it's actors, and it's the will. And so if you have those things, then you can. Not going to film school, I have noticed a bit of a tendency of people that have gone to film school, not to knock everybody that's gone to film school, but there has been a bit of a mentality of, I wasn't trained for that. Not like I didn't learn that in class, but like, that's not my job. And so, like, in terms of, like, being a team player, like, I remember on both my shorts, my wonderful AD advised me on some things that I shouldn't do on a traditional set. And he was absolutely right. But where I was coming from was to get the job done.
You gotta do whatever you gotta do.
And they weren't safety concerns. It wasn't anything that was, but it was just, like, in terms of professionalism and what to expect in bigger sets. And not that I want to disregard that advice. It just certainly tells me that, that is more of a traditionalist attitude. And there were instances in a lot of ways where I haven't felt that people that have gone to film school want to learn every component. They've really tried to be more in service of a particular craft.
So it sounds to me, please tell me if I'm putting words here, but it sounds like from your perspective, film school in some ways does a disservice in preparing people for kind of the indie film world that most people kind of start out in.
Absolutely.
Just in the sense that you aren't prepared to be wearing multiple hats.
Well, in film school, everybody is given generally no budget to make a thesis film. And so they all have to, wear multiple caps. But I think they all are more determined to, I guess you could say that academia is kind of instilled in them. They should be focused on this one thing, and when you're in this role, be focused on that one thing. So that when they're finally in that one role, they're focused on that one thing. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. But there's these other things that are also going around. And so it's a little bit of that mentality of everybody just, wearing the specific hat. I've found also that there's a little bit of a difference between craftsman filmmakers and artistic filmmakers. And so like some of the people that I've put on my crew would easily call themselves a writer or a director or a producer. And those are the caps that I wear on my production sometimes. I don't try to disregard them as those artists, even though they're wearing the DP cap that day. I want them to bring what they know as a writer to their DP role without them, giving me their script.
But, so you have to walk the line.
They walk the line, but I find value in that. There's things to juggle, but I think you get some beautiful moments when you bring people that are looking at it from many different perspectives with an artistic eye, as opposed to crafting it just the way that I tell. Because I do like that collaboration. I do like to see what somebody can bring. While I can always dictate, I'm not going to claim that I'm a great dictator. So
I'm interested in this. Going from Virginia to LA, that's a little bit of a big geographic move there. At what point in your filmmaking career, I'm assuming the beginning, did you decide, I got to go to the West Coast? I got to go to LA. I got to be in the thick of it.
It was, all of this really was a revelation my fourth year. I took an arts administration course. First day, they talked about producing a play. And that's when I realized that even producing, like the business of telling a story was a thing. And it took until my fourth year to really kind of make those items click in my head. I was focused on advertising, and I realized, and I was looking at the big cities for that. So I already realized, like, okay, to have, some of the jobs that I'd pined for might have to go to a big city. Once I learned the art behind storytelling and that LA was the hub for it, then it was just a definitive, there's only one life to live. and I'm going to go to the center. Everybody asked me, because my business school was very successful in placing people, and I was one of the few, if maybe only people to leave the program without a job. Like without a job, without a nice job. You know? The kind of job that people are like comparing what they're getting in the 401k package.
Yeah.
I drove out. You know, it was really about picking which freeway and what kind of scenic view did I want to have.
Yeah. Did you do the southern or northern?
So I right down the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, which was kind of boring, and don't necessarily recommend to all the viewers. No disregard to Kansas. But that was like the biggest choice that I had to make once I knew. So I knew heading into my final semester that I was going to move out west, and that nobody was going to care about me until I moved out here.
Yeah. Because
being on the other end of it now for 13 years, and then I did end up hiring a lot of interns at one point. It's all moot until people are here. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a lot of, because so many people want to come here, and then so many people talk about it's all so much talk. And so you got to see who's actually acting on it. I moved out here June of 2008, not knowing anybody, and found my place on Craigslist. I stayed with a friend for a week, and after that, that was a nice enough extension, and stayed in Culver City for the next 6 years. Wow! But then it took me a good 5 months to get an industry gig. I didn't have any industry experience on my resume. I applied to production companies, management companies, agencies, all with a resume that was quite well qualified for something potentially on Wall Street or in DC. But it didn't cater to the film business. Sure. And HR even was calling me saying, there's nothing here. You're great. There's nothing here that allows me to bring you in for an interview. Double major too, and the kind of thing, it's like, well, I'm not putting my GPA on there anymore. Nobody cares. Like, nobody cares about any of these things. Yeah. And so I did some hustling. I did some temp work. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, to make the ends meet, I was short order cooking and doing that at restaurants, working in an Irish pub, and kind of living the life of a recent college grad. But it was odd that, again, I moved out here, and one of the best options was working at a temp agency. And then from that temp agency, what was the possible best opportunity? Working in a mailroom. I mean, we could have been 100 years ago, and these would still be the career advice. So it's just kind of odd. It's actually
it's weird, because I've heard the mailroom a lot. Mm-hmm. I remember I was meeting with a VP at Paramount, and he's like, the best way to get into this company is to start working at the mailroom. That's what our CEO did. And I was like, I didn't think anyone did that since like the 80s, man.
Yeah.
But apparently it's good. So where did you start working in the mailroom at, and what was that like?
So that's just it. The mailroom is the mailroom. Like, the mailroom is the mailroom. There's no here's my desk at the mailroom. It's this is where the mail gets sorted, and these are the people that you're with. For me, it was actually a great experience because we had just entered the writer's strike.
Oh, okay.
I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the writer's strike that took place in 07, 08.
07,
yeah. And so I moved out here in 07, and then from 07 to 08, the writer's strike at UTA put a hiring freeze on everybody, every agency, every production company. Everybody was kind of at a standstill. So it became a bit of like a fraternity for me in my mailroom class, if you could call it that. Like, people that were looking to, and to describe the position a little bit, mailroom was a position where you would sort the mail, and you'd put together press books where it'd be headshots for casting books. So you would be either taking mail to people in the office, delivering mail to celebrities out of the office, or you're putting together packages from your client base to send to casting directors for features. That was kind of the gist of it, the three things. Okay. And then why would you be in a mailroom? Because it's all an opportunity and a breeding ground to then become an assistant. So, there's all these different departments in an agency.
So how do people network out of the mailroom as opposed to getting trapped there forever? Is there a secret to that success, or?
when you're in the mailroom, you're in the mailroom. Meaning, like, you've been vetted enough that you're going to find a desk. You know?
Yeah.
You might find a desk with the department that they've housed in the basement, and your boss might be the guy or woman with the dingiest office.
Yeah.
But that'll soon, if you, in a year's time, if you haven't found a home in the mailroom yet, they'll find you that home.
Okay.
Nice.
You know?
Okay.
Because you're in the system, you're vetted, and you've proven some of yourself. I cannot think of an instance where somebody got into the mailroom and never made it onto a desk. That was not the purpose of it. The purpose of it was really to find you a home once you're in our home.
Yeah.
You know? It's almost like, you know, going to college, and for the first full year, you can only take liberal arts. You can't specialize.
Yeah.
And now you can specialize. And matter of fact, since I left UTA, like the year after, they called it UTA University, which like probably even describing now what the mailroom is makes sense in what they went forward with in their plan, because like,
self-aware.
Yeah, like, you know, it's like, oh, do I want to work in marketing? Do I want to work in music? Do I want to work in reality? And for me, I remember my first conversation with an executive at HBO that has worked on so many of their big productions on the physical production end. And when I told her I wanted to be a producer because I like telling stories, well, first off, I mean, those aren't two of the same thing. Telling stories and a producer, and then, and not that a producer can't tell stories, but she just said, well, what kind of producer? Because I can already think of 10 to 12 different types of producers.
Yeah.
Like, what type of producer do you want to be?
Yeah.
And so, like, it just kind of floored me. And I'm the kind of person that if I don't have an answer, I stay quiet.
Okay.
And I then went into the mailroom and started to learn all these different aspects of what it takes in the industry to be on a call with somebody that's a talent rep and to hear how they talk to a casting director and to learn that world in the course of a day that I didn't kind of know existed, and to learn the familiarity and the lexicon that they use.
Yeah.
Like, all of that was like really helpful.
So it actually gives you really good firsthand insider knowledge of really the backbone of the industry.
If you can muster it, it's worth it. And what I mean by that is it's mentally taxing.
Okay.
It's I don't know what it's like almost a decade since I've gone through it, but you know, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, you know, like, I mean, and no specific stories that wouldn't be a story at any other agency. That's just kind of it. But like haven't been spoken to in a way.
Yeah.
Ever in a professional setting than I was at the agency.
Yeah.
And then some of the stories that you hear about, you know, and some of the things that I might have been like even, you know, duplicitously involved in, you know, like it's like, oh, wouldn't have thought. And so like to be in that environment, and I've hired a lot of people that have come from agencies, and I've put a lot of people up for agencies. A lot of people don't get up for the agencies, and I can almost pinpoint immediately who those people are.
Yeah.
And it involves their willingness to take a hit on the chin, figuratively, and their willingness to be in the business at any cost.
Gotcha.
And if you can take a hit on the chin and be in the business at any cost, you can be in an agency.
Okay.
But that's a very specific type of person, and that doesn't, you know, not every storyteller or camera operator or actor should heed the advice of a mailroom, because like that's just a very specific type of person.
Yeah.
And thankfully, with my business background, I was able to do it, even though I am more of an artist. I think me transitioning to where I am now, starting in an agency, is kind of atypical a little bit, because it was such on the business end, the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And then I slowly realized more and more, like, oh, this is not where I want to be.
All from the mailroom.
So once you left the mailroom, where were you off to then?
So I worked on a TV lit desk, worked that for a couple months, and then, which is very common, next gigs, so much of being an assistant in an agency is about the next job.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit of advice. Don't be too good of an assistant, because nobody wants to get rid of too good of an assistant. But I then get a call from an executive producer that had a pilot script set up at HBO and was looking for an assistant for him and another EP. And I didn't know at the time that a pilot script at HBO meant you were kind of in contention with 400 other projects. but I did have the knowledge of the agency that I was at. It was the same client from the desk that I was on, and the head of the TV Lit department had just gone to become the president at HBO.
Oh, wow.
So I was getting a good feeling about this project, and I wanted to, at the time, I knew I wanted to get more involved in production, so I made the jump. And so when he asked me, he actually called me to let the entire agency know about this position, because that is the common thing. And if you want an assistant, you'll let sometimes the agency know, and then they'll blast it out.
Right.
And so I threw my hat in, and I got the job.
Nice.
That was at a company called Blueprint Entertainment that later became Entertainment One.
Okay.
And so you could say that I was at Entertainment One for 8 years, from assistant to then manager or executive level.
Wow. Wow. So
That's crazy.
Working at Entertainment One, you're doing development work.
Correct.
Can you talk about any of the projects that you were in development on?
Yeah. So that TV pilot script at HBO became the show Hung.
With Tom Jane?
With Tom Jane, yeah.
Okay.
So worked on that for 3 seasons. Cool. And then got involved early on the development of an AMC project that later became Hell on Wheels.
Oh, dude,
So
that's cool.
5 seasons of Hell on Wheels. Then kind of got involved in a plethora of other TV concepts. A lot of half hours, some hours, and some sci-fi shows, some broadcast. But as far as like my sensibilities, those were like the 2 shows I kind of sunk my teeth into.
Yeah.
And then in terms of development, because everybody's like, oh, what shows did you work on? It was my job to launch shows. And then I wiped my hands because, I didn't realize until I was kind of in the belly of the beast that there's a whole department called the current department. And they keep the show current. And so like my job was to tee them up and to set them up and to package them to get that inciting incident, to get that pilot script, to get that backdoor project at the network, to find the home, to get that pilot made. Mm-hmm. But then once it was a pilot, or once it was a finished concept in terms of where it can be in serialization, then I was done.
So what are your biggest takeaways now as an artist? What do you think you took away the most from that developmental process? Did it help you get a better idea of what it takes to pitch a project and get one picked up? Is it? Do you think you became a better writer or a filmmaker?
All of it, because every idea starts with the development of it, and so. No idea.
I mean, were you directly taking pitches from people? Like, was that one of?
I mean, my day was littered with creative ideas from other people. I at one point, I broke down at least in theory how many ideas I heard, and it was well over 10,000.
Oh my gosh!
Just like well over, to the point where like I just don't want to keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's okay. And it would come in forms of log lines from an agent. Okay, 1 email, 5 log lines, 5 ideas right there.
Yeah.
A script that I then have to go home and read. A pitch meeting where 2 ideas are thrown at me.
Yeah.
So it happened all the time. All of the things that I received were vetted. Okay. So what did I learn from this? Nothing is original. Oh. Nothing is original. Like everything is a variation on something that we have seen before, and own it and embrace it. And I try to push these elements as far as we can without being completely abstract in terms of my filmmaking. But like that's what I've learned, that I'm trying not to be too precious with encroaching on someone else's space if I can find a specific slant. Okay. I don't try to get stifled on it's we've seen that before. Well, we've seen so many things before, and I'm not saying that it can't can't be completely unoriginal. Most things are unoriginal, but that's the point. Like, most things are unoriginal because we've seen it so many times before. So I don't get caught up in that.
So can I ask, do you have any advice to the rest of us out here who are thinking, I'm going to pitch a show? Do you have 3 points that everyone should know in if they're going to go to a pitch meeting? To make sure that you don't fall into that trap of, I just listened to 10,000 ideas and they're all unoriginal. How can you stand apart?
Well, the first is, I guess, know the medium that you want it to exist on.
Okay.
So is it a feature? If it's a feature, is it a feature film? Is it a short film? If it's a feature film, then come in and pitch the feature film. If you come in and pitch the franchise, I'm at a place now where I'm going to kick you out of my office. Because, like, I have to see the first one and it has to be successful. If we're already talking about number 2 and 3, you're wasting my time.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, that's something that people always misrepresent. They will come in and they will, or not misrepresent, but they
try to, like, oversell it. Or, like,
they oversell it. They oversell it to the point where could be the TV show, it is the movie, here's the social media campaign, here's the poster, you know? I need a log line, I need a character, I need a script, you know?
Yeah.
I don't care about your goddamn hashtag.
Yeah.
And that's something that I certainly find to become more and more common in the era of social media. People feel like they need to hinge on that. And everything starts with a good story still.
Yeah.
And it will always be about a good story. What's the best place for this story to exist? If you say, well, it's really a feature, but I don't know how it ends, so I'm thinking TV. Boom, kick you out of my office.
Yeah, you've told me that before.
That's another one. That's like, again, that's not well thought through enough. You know, like, you know, if again working in development, I did develop a lot of completed features as then launching them for TV series. That's built on the success of the IP that people are then familiar with. You know? Like, it's way too premature to be in my office where I still have to talk to my bosses and we're talking about sequels and social media campaigns.
Yeah.
And so like that's where I think some people get disconnected. Another great thing, and I just kind of alluded to it, generally the person you're pitching to is not the person that's the buyer. Okay. You know, I mean, TV is its own machine where it's millions for anything.
Yeah,
it's millions for anything. Yeah, and so even if you're a producer, you're going to a studio, you know, or you're going to the streaming service that could buy it. You know, you're not meeting the indie producer or the investor at a bar that could give you your money for your film. Yeah, you know, these are different conversations. So in the world of TV, you're never pitching really to the person that can buy, unless you're the showrunner, EP level. And so you brought them in. What's
the best way to get around that? Is it to make sure that your ideas are concise and digestible? And is that when it's really important to say it's RoboCop meets Mr. Mom? Like, you know, is that where all those things become so important? So that way it's not, the idea is not lost in translation after you've heard 30 pitches in a day and you go on to your boss and...
Brilliant. You're absolutely right.
I want to do RoboCop meets Mr. Mom.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
that's good advice.
You know, one of the things that I kind of joke about is that, like, Christopher Nolan made my life a little easier in TV development because, like, so many people were bringing me, like, these dream projects. And it's like, you know, until Inception came out, it's like, well, I can't really, like, I mean, I can articulate it, but I can't articulate it to somebody that has no concept, that wasn't in the pitch meeting, that then has to make a financial decision based on it. Yeah. But I can easily say, oh, no, it's a procedural Inception.
Yeah, no, that works. Like, everybody gets it.
And now everybody gets it. Okay, it's a procedural Inception. Now has like all this meaning that it didn't have prior. You know? Yeah. And you know, going back to like TV, movie, medium, like sometimes it's nice to have that thing that you can then, you know, be the crux of your...
So in that instance, it really is important to know what your project is like, what you're quote unquote borrowing from, so you actually have a better chance of selling it.
Precise.
Sounds like if it's too obscure, then people are going to be like, I can't summarize this, so it's just going to get kicked to the curb again.
Too obscure, or you reference a project that has a difficult past or was unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. You know, people are going to remember the end result at the end of the day, and you shouldn't be the one that had no attachment to a former project, defending how, but it could have been different.
So
and this is why mine is.
So you never want to pitch anything and compare it to John Carter.
That's a great way. To
That's
put
what
it.
you're saying.
That's a great way to put
Okay.
it.
Okay.
You know, one of the things that I was able to do on my towards my end as a development executive, when I really started to realize that my passion was writing and storytelling beyond development, was when I was taking out a samurai project for television as a series, and I looked at the market. The reason I really thought that it could be done is because there were 3 active television series starring pirate shows, or not starring pirates, but that involved pirates.
Yeah.
And pirates are not American based, so there were really 3 international shows that were on network, cable, and premium cable. This was around maybe 2013.
Okay.
2013.
Huh. Okay. Okay.
And so I knew that the market was open, that buyers were already open to telling these more international action themed stories. And so I started thinking about what was missing in the marketplace. And so
So you naturally thought pirates versus ninjas. No one's told the ninja side of the story.
Nobody has told the ninja side of the story.
Okay.
And I, beyond having just an affinity for the culture, it was like, well, there's real commercial value here, but pirates involved Caucasians. And I'm at the end of the day, I still know that this is American Western market. How do I take this so inherently international show, or really culture, not international, but an Asian concept show, and bring it commercial success in the States. And so I was able to find this point in history where East meets West. And it was the inciting incident for everything that then became the end of feudal Japan for that for that samurai culture. And it took place in the turn of the 18th century, and it involved Dutch settlement, and eventually Americans did get
Perry
involved
went
as
over
well.
there.
It was pre-Perry, but just 3 decades prior. And so it was the point in time, and I knew that, again, there were so many buyers in television, and it was becoming Walking Dead and 3 pirate shows. What's a genre that's missing? This. And so I remember, and funny story, but I remember calling up Stars and thinking, this is such a Stars series. I can't wait to talk to them. They had Blood and Sand on, they had one of the pirate shows on, and they tell me that, and after me kind of going on about the world for 3-4 minutes, oh, well, we just heard this.
What?
And I was like, what do you mean you just heard this? And they were like, yeah, we just heard this about kind of a secret island where East and West met, and Sam Worthington was in here just a week ago pitching this. He's all about this. And then I end up finding through different kind of back channels that Sam Worthington and I have competing projects. So we're both taking out the same samurai world.
Really?
So then it becomes a little bit of a hustle.
Yeah.
And I'm at a studio, so that gives me a little bit of leverage. And so we call up all of the usual suspects, and I realized very early on that the way to find success is to discount why we haven't seen it. And so that's how I went into every pitch. Every pitch is kind of different, getting back to your point in structuring a pitch.
Yeah.
It's every pitch is a little different, whether it's taking place with a bigger world, which this one was. It wasn't a character driven. It wasn't like a Breaking Bad pitch. So it was kind of a big world. But to have people buy into the big world, they needed to have a little bit of comfort into, well, why haven't we seen this? And so I just hit on all the reasons why we haven't seen it, almost some of the prejudices. And by just knocking at those prejudices, it broke down the barriers enough where it's okay, now we can hear the story, because I feel comfortable that just putting it point blank, half the faces being Asian won't turn my audience away. And that's how a buyer is thinking. Which is, as an artist, it's very unflattering to hear or to process. But it's one of the things you have to do, and especially in TV being so
numbers based. Really? So does Sam Worthington hate you now?
we never met. And even though I did set mine up, and I don't know what happened to his.
Did yours ever get produced? Or?
Mine did not. No, it got set up at WGN America. And this is, going back to, helping all the listeners. So this is the thing that I really, the end takeaway. TV is such a machine that it needs to be precisely packaged. Packaged with credits and experience, something that I didn't even realize until years of development work is that the people that could sell TV weren't the people that were in their 20s or 30s or 40s coming into my office generally. Not to be an ageist, but it was generally 40s, 50s, and 60s of the people that were
that's good to know.
The showrunners.
Because you hear about the opposite, right? You hear about how when the television industry is looking for writers, they are much more notorious than film for looking for the young writers who can bring the new perspective on the cutting edge of what society wants and is looking. So it's interesting to hear that at the top level that they still want the seasoned, experienced vets that know what they're doing.
Because the writers' rooms have been similar to kind of like how independent filmmaking has taken off. Like everything is now more in the hands of the creator. So writers' rooms don't even follow the structure that they used to. Yeah. So the people that are familiar with the structure are inherently older, and that structure has value. The way that a writer's room works for television has value, and if you are the young auteur getting commissioned 10 episodes, you may not know how a story should break down over 10 episodes, and how the character interactions and how the conflict should play, and that's why, even though we're seeing so much TV, and some of it is fantastic, we are in the gold or platinum or whatever you want to say era of television. There are some shows that are really missing the mark, or even some great shows that people are like, this season really took a miss.
Now, can I ask you, just to cut you off, can you list like what you think 2 or 3 shows that really excel, and if you want to even mention 2 that you think fall short? With your executive hat on? Yeah. Do you have any opinions? Anything our listeners should be checking out?
Well, it's really tough to sustain a show. And I'm a movie guy. So I came from TV, but what I learned was like the cinematic experience that is transitioning to television, which I really appreciate, is tough to sustain. So I guess what I'm saying is I loved season 1 of The Leftovers, and I talk about it a lot with people. And like I'm like that nitpicky where like, I won't say like watch this episode, like, because I want somebody to have like a context of what TV is and multiple episodes. But like I feel like there's seasons that really work, and then I think that there's a lot of things that just miss the mark, I loved Game of Thrones and what it was,
especially that last season.
But they can kind of all have that. They all have that. Leftover seasons 2 and 3 did not fulfill me in the way that season 1 did. So like, for me, I hold a very high benchmark, and I tell people that if you haven't seen The Sopranos, if you haven't seen Deadwood, if you haven't watched The Wire,
my God, those are 3 great. I got to tell you though, Deadwood is one of my favorite shows ever made. Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's brilliant. It's Shakespeare in the West. Yeah. David Chase, what he did with The Sopranos, and not just in what it brought to television, because sometimes we like analyze filmmaking historically as to why it's the best because of everything that it allowed to come after it. No, The Sopranos is the best, not because of what it allowed to come after it, but because of also what it is, and just how they held these beats and moments with characters and then fulfilled those characters so that I never felt that I wasn't respected as an audience member. Yeah. Like too often I feel like, showrunners and creators aren't respecting the audience living with these characters. And so like, all 3 of those shows, when significant things happened, me and my friends, we were impacted. We were impacted watching them. We were impacted after, when we talked about them. And I'm not saying that those experiences can't happen in Walking Dead or what's some other hit shows that are on right now. I mean, Black Mirror is a great conversation piece that everybody's talking about. But in terms of like me and my sensibilities, taking that psychology degree and putting it to use.
Yeah.
It's those 3 shows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All of which are HBO shows. Right?
All of which are HBO shows.
Can't help but feel there's a little bit of a bias there.
You know what? I like to think that the person that was they were all programmed by the same person.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Someone
knew what they were doing.
Someone who knew what they're doing.
Yeah, he just so happens to be kind of an awful person. But, I mean, we find that sometimes, right? Sometimes the people that commission great projects seem to be awful.
Okay, so now let's go into you as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
You have this background kind of in development, in psychology. Now you're a writer and director.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about some of your recent projects, how that experience has made you a better artist and filmmaker and businessman? And
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of my development experience, it goes back to what is original. You know, I know I was a tough critic on originality and saying nothing is original, but what I really mean about that is like, even if you see something that to the viewer is original, it might follow a structure that underneath it was derivative of something else, you know? Sure. And so like that's been helpful for me. Like I like to reference other projects when I'm building a project, so I know that I'm not starting in a vacuum of nothing.
Yeah.
You know, like I like to know that there's viability in the beginning, viability in the end, and I got to figure out all the parts.
Yeah.
And so that is then kind of launched me into having a voice. Okay. And I think one of the things that was inhibiting me earlier as a storyteller was that I could find the cool story, but then to find the voice to tell the story was different.
Okay.
And it really came with maturity. People were like, oh, I didn't know you wanted to do this, or what changed? And neither of those things changed, and I never felt like I did like a big career change because I went from developing stories, which was a form of telling them, to telling stories.
Yeah.
But it was just the maturity of it. For me, I do think in terms of what a lot of writers tackle, do you start with character, you start with theme? I start with theme.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
I start with theme. Because that's going to carry my passion all the way through to the end project. Because
interesting.
I'm telling it not so much so that somebody can I want them to relate to the characters. Mm-hmm. So it's not that I don't, but I want them to have a feeling about what they've seen at the end of it that doesn't have to be attached necessarily to a particular character.
Sure. Okay.
And so to do that, I liked starting with theme, and that's what really transitioned me into a writer. Once I started realizing, like, oh wait, this samurai thing that I pitched and all of its cool beats really could be playing off of like the introverted and the extroverted culture of East and West. Yeah. And the dichotomy of how these two cultures that have risen, to form these powers over almost like 2 to 3 millennia, how they now are meeting. And almost meeting kind of for the first time, or in a context where like technology will never keep them apart again. Yeah. Yes. That's where it was all. So like I wouldn't have thought of those things until maturity, kind of, and thinking about like where that can go. And that doesn't necessarily help in a pitch, but it helps as a writer.
But it does help. I mean, I do see how, if you're telling that story, how that's very different than I'm trying to follow the life of this one individual in this point of time. Because then, as you said, you can apply that across, the Eastern characters and the Western characters, and your heroes and your villains, and you know how to integrate every character that you develop into that equation. Mm-hmm. So it makes a lot of sense when you break it down that way.
It helps me as a map and kind of charting where we need to go. Okay. It's not helpful in a pitch because it's way too heady. Okay. And people need character and references in a pitch. Not to like belittle my former position, but like nobody wants to have an hour-long philosophical conversation that they then have with their boss. Yeah. Nobody likes that. Everybody wants to hinge it on a character and a reference or two and what the world can be or characters in the world. But in terms of what struck me into getting into writing stories and why I feel like I'm going to be a storyteller for life, it's because of finding that theme that I want to explore, and then what best services that. Okay.
Very cool.
Gotcha.
You want to talk movies?
Yeah, let's do some movie talk.
You want to talk some
I
movies?
want to talk movies, yeah.
Not that we haven't been doing that
yeah.
already, but
Yeah.
you yourself are a movie guy.
I am a movie guy more than a TV guy. Sorry
So, all right.
Back 10 years for television.
I'm going to throw this out
20
there.
years for television.
In your opinion, as a writer, director, development executive, what is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia.
God,
There you go.
just an awful movie.
No, Lawrence of Arabia is pretty great.
Sell me on Lawrence of Arabia, because film teachers, cinematographers,
AFI lists.
people who score films have all been telling me that this is the greatest movie ever. And honestly,
Steven Spielberg.
I would list it as probably like one of the top 5 most overrated movies.
Top 5 most overrated films.
Dang.
Wow.
Yeah.
We gotta flip that list over.
Lawrence of Arabia. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly show it some love if it's getting some hate in the room.
It's getting a lot of hate from this guy right here.
First off, I can only every film is personal. That's what I love.
Okay.
That's what I love about filmmaking. At least for myself as a filmmaker, I don't hope to reach the audiences in full love. I just want to reach the audiences.
Okay.
So I respect your opinion, is what I'm saying. For me personally, growing up in West Virginia, first off, it's a beautiful location. It's the opposite of where I grew up.
Okay.
It's
In every way.
in every way. The desert is not 50 Shades of Green. I was drawn to it, and I'll never forget being 14 years old and talking to it about my friends, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And then I was like, and I haven't even finished it yet because it's long. It's
Yeah. Lawrence of Arabia has an intermission.
It does have an intermission. Yeah. The thing that started to speak to me in terms of story and why I couldn't stop telling my friends about it, even though I couldn't articulate it even at the time, is that it just seemed to encompass everything that art form could be. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. And so from its staging, to its acting, to its sound design, to its editing, to its cinematography, to its score, if I didn't mention it, it just encompassed every element. And it almost seemed to do it in a level of perfection. Not that you can really perfect what a shot is or what a moment is. I did kind of revisit it recently thinking about this podcast because for me, I'd watched it so many times. And then when it launched universally in like 200 theaters in 70 millimeter, I saw it that day.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I took off work, I saw it that day. Because it spoke to me on that level. And I've probably seen it over 100 times at this point. And a lot of it is just passive viewing.
Sure.
And so I did kind of actively watch it again. And it's everything from the believability for me of the performances to the transition scenes that Lean does brilliantly through his career, but some of the best ever in this movie, from blowing out a match that gives us this beautiful character description in such a short amount of time, to then transitioning to the desert. And the vastness of that, shot in that great cinema scope. And also thinking about the transition of that scene, not just from its visual, but from what it symbolizes in a match going to the sun and the horizon, but also the breath blowing out the match and breathing life into the next scene. There's so many transition cuts in this film that I don't think they could be teed up in a better way. And I think that it kind of did leverage, not to talk about it too much in terms of historicism, but I think so many filmmakers learned from what Lean did, particularly in that film. Because, there are a lot of cuts where it'll be a sound cut paired with a sound cut, but the sounds are just a little off, but they work, and we're in two completely different worlds between the cuts.
Yeah.
Or it'll be Anthony Quinn saying that he's going to take us to his home, and as he extends his arm, the next shot is a view of his home zooming into it from this huge pan out.
Yeah.
And so they're just always bringing the viewer in. The exchange between O'Toole and Omar Sharif, where they need to figure out the next the next place to conquer, and how Omar Sharif comes into screen when they say that they need to go to Aqaba.
Yeah.
The little power dynamics with very minimal camera movement.
Okay.
When I look at it from a different lens, it's like the opposite of anything that could then be done in the Steadicam world, because it's all like locked off cameras, actors. It could almost be a play. It could almost be a play with beautiful backstaging.
Yeah.
But they take it one step further, where you're actually immersed in the world. You're in it. The score keeps you in it. The moments of triumph. For instance, when Lawrence goes into the desert to find the lost soul and bring him back.
Yeah.
That is kind of storytelling in its way, in a meta way, where he's like, no story is written, and that is film. It's not done until it's completed. Yeah. The thematics, because that's where I start. It involves politics, geopolitics, race, religion, war, British imperialism. Going back to the politics, but there's just a lot of elements that all wrap up into the story of a character. And so that's why it always spoke to me. It's like it never got too heady for the film. It never extended the character beyond a place of believability for me. Okay. And there's just a lot of films that I love, but that's one that just seems to check so much off.
Done it justice right now.
Wow, that's quite a sales pitch. So if you haven't seen Lawrence of Arabia, Harrison will tell you should. I'll tell you should not.
I feel you should be advocating that they should. Either way, just join me on my side.
Yeah. You should find it on Netflix, and I get 1% from every rental.
No, I get it, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the cinematography. It does some stuff that I think is really stunning. Which, I mean, when you think about the fact that at the time they made it, it's a bunch of people crawling around in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, we're going to shoot a movie that has no women. It's in a part of the world that a lot of the audience members at the time knew nothing about. It's an ambitious project. Yeah. I wish there was a way they could find it, to cut 80 minutes out of the story. And I think for me, I think the real issue is, and you probably disagree, I think that the character of T.E. Lawrence in the film, we don't see a ton of growth from him. You'll be like, I disagree. And I think that even the fact that when... spoiler, he gets tortured. He does. Quote unquote humbled. Yeah. He's not really humbled. He's still the same T.E. Lawrence that he was for most.
He tries not to be, but
he becomes so much worse. He becomes the worst version of himself after that, and then he goes and massacres a bunch of people. Yeah. Because he's now felt some of the pain that he's been dealing out, and he's hardened, and he's bitter. He's bitter, he was very passionate about where the direction of the world can be. Optimistic and naive. Yeah. And that optimism and naivete allowed him to cross the desert when everybody told him not to and survive it, and then go back and find somebody and survive it. But then when he's actually confronted, when he goes gallivanting into the Turks region and they, probably rape him and torture him, well, then he comes out a little different. And it is built a little bit in context with the relationship of Sheriff Ali. But you do get the sense that, he's now a man on a mission for him when he was more on a mission for greater good. And that does come across when he massacres. It does come across when he, as it generally does. People that massacre generally aren't thinking about, other people than themselves. So there's that. So I would say reevaluate that part, or maybe you should just watch the massacre scene a couple times to reinforce it, or just play the scene with the Turk and be like, yeah, I wonder what happened between this scene with him getting his skin pinched and then him being thrown into the back alley. See, and maybe you can see the character.
I think you just want me to waste another 4 hours watching.
No, I've pinpointed very specific moments. That's only 2 hours.
Yeah, and his character is interesting in the sense that it's almost like constantly he's reevaluating his own identity, right? He kills someone and it's kind of like that. I thought I would feel way worse, or he's constantly in this internal conflict. But like you said, where he ends up and what his actions do, you're like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
It is pretty crazy. And it's a course that anybody's capable of because we've seen it in the course of history.
Yeah. For me personally, one of the things that, like Lawrence of Arabia, it just holds up so well I mean, it looks as good as, any movie that would be released now.
It does.
And when did that movie come out? 70s?
64.
64? Okay. Yeah, so you think, like, wow, this was shot that long ago, before 64. And if you were to put that on the screen right now, it would be as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than most movies that come out now. Mm-hmm. It's quite impressive, especially when you consider movies, from the, you watch like old, like, I don't know, Ocean's 11 or something. You're like totally a product of its time.
Yeah.
It feels like it's from that time.
Yeah.
You watch Lawrence of Arabia, you're like, shoot.
And those David Lean epics are very specific. Bridge on the River Kwai, Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah.
I like them all. But it's a lot of locked off shots with power dynamics and blocking.
I'll give you that.
Longer takes, allowing your actors to actually feel the moments and like us feel more a little bit voyeuristic. I think that's one thing that we've lost in cinema with so many edits and cuts is that we've lost the longer take and the voyeurism of listening in on a scene. Because we can feel the scene if it's one take. There's that one take in Vertigo that I love. When he's first finding out about the case, and it's like, and it's all this great blocking and staging, and what are they doing, and then the little things that Lean will do, for instance, like the handing of a business card, the person looking at the business card, and then the person that has the business card in the third cut is a new person. So like little ways to transition so seamlessly that these locked off shots allow. Where if we were moving all around, then it would be lost.
No, that's a good point.
We would be confused. Oh wait, we were just in this place, and now we're in this place. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of things that I've learned from the simplicity and the complexity that he added. How a lot of that wouldn't work today. And, keeping it simple, how simple can work.
Wow. Yeah, you love your film.
I do love my film. And I love this film. I will defend this film, even though it doesn't not have any women in it. But that's okay. Technically, there's sirens that are probably uncredited up from the cliffs. Like
that's true. And I mean, obviously, when the movie was made and the time that the movie was made about, right, in early 1900s. So I get it. Part of the world. Mm-hmm. It's understandable. It's just...
Some people even discredit it now because of the role that like Sir Alec Guinness played.
Yeah.
Him playing Prince Faisal. I certainly as an artist, I never think that we should look at things in that light.
No, we can't evaluate art through the lens that we look at the world today.
Right.
Because it's a different time and place.
Yeah, and it's not fair to those artists at the time. They did incredible work, and they weren't, they did incredible work.
Yeah. I mean, how can we judge something 50 years later with what we consider acceptable?
Oh, we can.
And we will. And we'll go to Twitter about it.
Yeah, we'll handle that on Twitter.
Okay. Well, Harrison, I'll tell you this. I will rewatch this movie. I will rewatch it
over the course of a week.
You sound like you're sacrificing.
Yeah.
I know. I'm sacrificing like half a day here. This is a sacrifice. It's funny because I don't make a point to see Lawrence of Arabia. Okay. And 2 times ago I saw it, believe it or not. I was actually in college and I saw it with this guy.
Yeah.
We were in a film class and I remember I was like, I hate this movie so much. I said, I gotta finish writing this paper. It's a good 3 hours. So I was like, I'm gonna finish writing this paper and then I'm gonna fall asleep. I need you to stay awake so you can take notes. So I finished typing up my paper. 15 minutes later, I turn over, and this guy's passed out. And I'm like, mother effer.
I'd already seen it.
Now I have to stay awake and watch this freaking movie that I can't stand again. Thank you. Appreciate it.
College.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. But yeah. I saw Lawrence of Arabia when I was, I don't know, younger. Early teens, I think. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was really good. Liked it then.
Didn't like it enough the second time.
No, I don't even think... That was probably the 3rd time I'd seen it. It's college. I was probably hungover or something. Whatever.
So you saw it on the big screen though, Harrison.
I did, yeah.
See, I feel like that probably does a lot of justice for the film just because...
It's made for the big screen,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'm willing to bet that you get much more from seeing it in,
big as possible. And remastered in 4K. Matter of fact... both Scorsese and Omar Sharif did a little intro, it wasn't live. I guess it was taped because it was in 200 theaters. But they all did like a little intro for the 4K remastering of it, and cool. seeing Omar Sharif, Sheriff Ali's character, come from the desert in that shot by the well in 4K, it was fucking awesome.
Really?
Yeah, because I've always loved that still shot. I mean, the line where he says the well is everything, like that is geopolitics at its core. Like it's the essence of the whole film is right there. Like, we have to disregard the fact that we're both humans. We instead realize that this is tribal survival and this is what matters. And and they play that out in what could be a play, and yet it's the most like cinematic thing that we could kind of write.
Has anyone adapted it to a play?
No, because it's a beautiful movie.
I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I think the first time I saw it, though, I watched it with my dad, and it was on TV. So back then, it was like full screen. I didn't even get the full thing. And then we watched it again in that film class I was talking about in my high school with McNulty. He was my professor, but he showed us that movie. So I think those were the 2 times I saw it before. And that was cool because at that point, it was a projector and everything was the right aspect ratio. But the first time I saw it was on TV. Yeah. Commercials and all that. Not the same.
No, because it's probably like 8 hours with commercials.
It would be. Yeah. Day-long marathon.
Okay. All right. As I said, I'll check it out. To our listeners, I would love to know your thoughts on Lawrence of Arabia. Are you with Harrison and it's just this masterpiece of cinema? Or are you like me and it's a little bit better than a piece of crap?
Wow. That's really low. That's it's like if you were rating it out of 10, I think you coming in and being like it's overrated would be like maybe a 7 or an 8. He's saying it's a 10. I think you just described it as like a 2.
Yeah.
Maybe give it
that went really low.
Like a 3.5.
Oh, man.
Do you like any movies with intermission? Is that like a disqualification?
Oh, no. I love, Spartacus, Ben-Hur. Like, I don't have a problem with the classic epic genre either. I love it. I don't have a problem with... Most of my favorite movies are in black and white, which obviously Lawrence of Arabia is not. But I'm saying, I don't mind the old style of cinema. I just...
Arab culture. You just hate it.
Wow. No, not the truth at all. Thank you for making me out to be a racist. I appreciate that.
Let's go to Twitter.
No, just as I said, I feel that it just runs a little long. Yeah. And I'm like, if you could trim it up a bit, I think it would. The point is, you guys can trash me on Twitter as well. Harrison, we really appreciate you coming on.
Honor,
can you give us what's some of the stuff that you're working on now? You have any projects that are in the works or anything that you're shipping out to festivals or
anything that people should maybe keep an eye out for?
Yeah, totally. Our film Crosswinds is making its round to film festivals right now. That is the short that was inspired by Dostoevsky, and then worked with a filmmaking partner on that, and we're gearing up some new projects.
Nice.
We got 2 shorts that we want to be working on, or are working on, one in prep. And then we're working on our first feature. And awesome. Right now, beyond the script in that, and once we finalize the script, we're going to be going out to investors. But that's something that
very exciting.
Yeah, it's close for us.
Congrats.
In terms of a real potential. It's a supernatural thriller, and we're really excited about it.
Dude, that's great. And to our audience, if you don't mind sending me links, I will be sure to blast them out so
I will.
Can check out Crosswinds.
I will, absolutely. You can check out Crosswinds. You can check out the other short that I did called Dad's BS. Those are the first 2 shorts that we've done thus far that have launched my filmmaking career as a writer, director, producer, and I'm excited.
And after you shoot your feature, we'll have to have you back on.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because that's going to be great to talk about.
Yes.
Do you have any shout-outs? Anyone you got to, give a shout-out to so you're not disowned by your mom or your hometown?
I can't be disowned by my mother. Got to give a shout out to my mother and my sister. Every filmmaker knows that it takes an army, and that army begins at home. So you should always thank the people that are closest to you, that support you, your friends, your family. And then, a shout out to Taliesin Nexus, because they gave me a lot of support in a way that I wasn't able to find as a filmmaker.
Cool.
And they empowered me going from a development executive to an auteur, and I thank them for that. And all the relationships that I've made, because again, it takes an army, so you got to keep meeting people, find hungry people,
fantastic,
embrace it.
Where can people connect with you?
Yes.
I'm a bit of a what would you say?
Luddite?
No.
Recluse?
Yeah, a little bit of a social media hermit. And so you can find me only on Instagram at Harrison Wade R. Harrison Wader.
Okay.
And that's my handle there. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
All good things come.
Thanks for coming on, man. We
Yeah,
really
thanks so much.
appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
This was fantastic. Lawrence of Arabia.
Love promoting Lawrence.
Yeah, Lawrence of Arabia. How about that, huh?
All right. Well, thank you so much again. We really enjoyed the episode. I hope our audience sends us some feedback and comments as soon as everything's out. Throw it over to you. Take us out, CP.
Listen, you guys got any questions or comments, or just want to spread your hatred for Lawrence, then by all means hit us up. You can find me at IndyCal5 or anywhere your social media takes you, and you can find him at
Big Kid D-Man.
Thanks for listening to another episode, and we'll see you soon.